Hello, I'm going to be talking about acrylic paints today. If you've seen many of my videos, you might know that I've been getting more into acrylic paints recently. Quite a few years ago, I went to a couple of painting classes in our village where the teacher was using acrylic paints, and he'd recommended that we get these Winsor & Newton professional acrylics, which are beautiful quality, highly pigmented and quite thick. I'll link to a video down below where I compare some of the different kinds of paints. So this is one of the paintings I did at the time then. This was a copy from a picture. I'm not sure what the original source is for that, I'm afraid. And this is another painting that I did at the time. But I wasn't overly enamoured with acrylics, so I hardly did anything with them for a number of years. Then towards the end of last year, I went on a course with Iona Sanders, and she taught us her style of painting with acrylics, again using thick, heavy body acrylics. But hers was a much looser style with big, bold, expressive strokes. And that really appealed to me. And I've been painting in that way more often since the end of last year. So this is the kind of thing that I was doing on the course. I can't fit this one in the shot because it's so big. For me, it was a revelation working at this size. I'd never worked this big before. I think ideally I would like to keep working at this size, but the problem I have is space. I work in my dining room at the dining table, and when I'm doing these acrylics I like working on up to 10 different paintings at the same time, switching from one to the other and keeping the speed very fast. So putting a few daubs on one and then going to another and putting in what I think the next one needs, and so on. And I'm just not able to do that very well. So I've been buying smaller boards and working with those. These are just some that I've done recently. But I was struggling with the line work a bit at this smaller size. I was finding that the heavy body paints are almost too thick for this size. So for the really big ones, rather than using up all of my Winsor & Newton professional acrylics, I've been enjoying these Winsor & Newton Galleria acrylics, which are quite nice. They come in different sizes. And for the kind of big loose work that I was doing, the quality of these was fine. I've also used the De La Rowney System 3 acrylics and then these Amsterdam acrylics, and they've been doing the job okay as well. Also last year I used golden heavy body acrylics for the first time. These are really thick and lovely, and I bought some convenience colours in colours that I just use a lot of. And I won't cover the whole big board in these because they're too expensive, but I do use them for details here and there. They're so pigmented and just really lovely. But as I said, I was struggling a bit with the thicker paints to get details done. Watering them down wasn't the solution, because to get them to a thickness that was easier to paint with, and then you lose much of the opacity. So in a recent video I showed this paint which I've bought, and that's Golden Fluid Acrylic, and I found that it was easier to do details with without compromising the pigmentedness and opacity of the paint. So I figured if I'm going to be carrying on working on smaller boards for the time being, I'd like to get some more of these fluid acrylics. Jackson's Art had a sale on them recently, so I decided to pick up quite a few colours. So what I'm going to be doing today is opening up those and swatching them out. I started having some work in the gallery in December, and although the gallery was shut for most of January and all of February up to this week, I did still sell a few paintings, and I was even lucky enough to sell one painting while the gallery was closed because someone contacted the gallery about buying my painting that was hanging in the window. So that's been really nice and given me some confidence that I do want to carry on working with acrylics, and that it was possibly worth investing in these extra paints. So first of all, I bought this set of 6 introductory colours, and I think this was about £25 in the sale. So I thought that was pretty good because these paints average out at about £10 each. I'm glad I've got more black because I've already used about half of this one. And then I picked out some individual colours which I knew I'd use the most. So let's see, Prussian hue, cobalt turquoise, sap green hue, buff titanium, yellow ochre, nickel azo yellow, burnt sienna, burnt umber light, transparent red iron oxide. I've got quinacridone magenta, quinacridone violet, light phthalo blue, and light magenta. And then I got a bigger tub of white because I always go through white the fastest in any medium. Then I also bought some high flow medium. I was just curious to see whether when I mix one of the heavy body acrylics with the high flow medium, I get something a little more fluid, like the fluid acrylics. So that's an experiment I'll do in a bit. So those are all the paints that I bought. And then I didn't realise I was getting it, but I got this free gift included as well. So take a look in here. So we've got some gesso, which I've just got some cheap PBO gesso. It'd be nice to compare it. Some fine pumice gel. I'm assuming that's a medium that you put down just to create more texture. And then so these two are heavy body acrylics. So they're the same paints as these, ultramarine and alizarin crimson hue, which are great colours. Then I've got one of the golden open slow drying acrylics. Then what are these ones? So I've got two fluid acrylics, which is the same range as the ones that I've just shown you. And then I've got one tube of matte acrylics. So the golden SoFlat range, and it would be nice to compare these to the Holbein acrylic wash set that I've got, and also the Lefranc Bourgeois flash paints, which are matte emulsion. So I'm curious how different or similar those are. And then I've got one of the golden high flow acrylics, which is their kind of runniest paint and can be used in airbrushes and in paint markers and things. So I'm really chuffed about the free gift because it lets me try out quite a few of the golden range, which I've not tried before. So I'm just going to swatch these out now and have a bit of a play. I'd also recently bought this Da Vinci Fort Basic set of acrylic brushes, and I've been enjoying those for more detailed acrylic work. And then I've got a couple of Princeton Selects in here. There's the Dagger Striper and then this round blender. So have a play with those as well. So they come with a little seal under the caps. And the larger one's got kind of a shiny surface that's set. I don't know if that's the paint or if that's actually a seal that Golden put on. I'll give it a shake and then I'll show you the consistency as it comes out of the tube. So you can actually drop it out of the bottle. And it paints out nice and smoothly like that. I added a little pen scribble for the others to test the opacity. So those are the colours that I chose, and I already had this iridescent gold deep from quite a long time ago, and that's an absolutely amazing gold. I really enjoy using that. Most of these colours are semi-opaque or semi-transparent. None of them are fully opaque, and then a couple are completely transparent. And then whilst I've got all of these other ones, I might as well show you the difference between some of them. There's loads of extra detail I could go into, but this really is just a quick play for me and give you a quick idea of what these different paints are like. So I'll just compare the heavy body acrylic with the fluid acrylic, both in ultramarine blue. So you can see it's just a lot more solid. These are both semi-transparent paints, but you keep your lines and you keep the raised up areas with the heavy body, and then the liquid, you can get a much smoother lay down. So say if I wanted to get a smooth line, I can try mixing water with the acrylic to make it thin enough to give me lines, but it's still got a little bit of gloopiness to it. I'll just show you the same again with the fluid acrylic. So I can get thinner lines, but the colours remaining stronger. And the other thing I can test out here actually is what happens when I mix the high flow medium. So I'll get some of the heavy body again. So that's a very, very runny, almost like milk consistency. So I'm able to make a thinner paint now. I'm still getting some of these lines, like when I mixed it with the water, but I just hadn't mixed it in very well. So you can get a thinner consistency, though it's still not as saturated as the fluid acrylic. So it definitely thins down the paint, and obviously you don't keep the same pigment load, but it does it in a way that won't break down the bond, which can happen when you use too much water with acrylics. The only other medium I've got is this gel matte medium from PBO. I'm just going to mix that with it because I'm curious what this does to the heavy body as well. So you can see it's a thicker medium. It's made the texture kind of more slippery and less thick to work with. So it's kind of just loosened it up a bit, and it's brought down the saturation a bit. I'm just painting out some of the heavy body next to it. because it's matte medium, I'm curious to see how much that actually mattifies the paint. So you can see how much it changes the concentration of the pigment. So I've dried these two off, and actually they're, other than in this really thick part of the heavy body paint, neither of them are very shiny. So yeah, I don't know how much the matte gel medium mattifies it, because this one already seems to be quite matte. I obviously can't test now how long this golden open slow drying acrylic takes to dry, but I'll just paint out a little bit to see how the consistency compares with my water soluble oil paints. So this is Winsor & Newton Artisan Permanent Sap Green. Some of the oils separated in that one. So this is a semi-transparent paint and it's called Jenkins Green. So that doesn't feel a huge amount different from painting out the heavy body paint. So the water mixable oil colour definitely has kind of a more slippery feel to it. And it definitely feels a little bit more oil-like in its consistency. So I don't think they're similar in how they feel. And then I'll just test out some of the different whites. I don't have golden heavy body white, so I'll just show you the Winsor & Newton acrylic titanium white, the professional acrylic, because I do think this is up there in terms of quality with the golden. So heavy body, then we've got the fluid, and then I've got this high flow white. So the high flow is definitely a lot runnier than the liquid. Let's just look at them when they brush out. So great opacity, and you keep all your lines and your marks and raised up bits with the heavy body. So the fluid and the high flow have got similar opacity and brush out to a similar kind of finishing point, but obviously you can use the high flow in a variety of different ways. I'm just grabbing out a dip pen. I just want to try it with this high flow ink. Whoop. That's really quite nice to use with the dip ink. Because it's acrylic, I need to make sure I've washed my nib off well before the paint can start to dry on it. I'll put down the nib name in the description box below if you're interested, but I have modified this slightly. I've taken off a reservoir from a different nib and added it onto this nib, just so I can write for a bit longer. But I am very rusty with my calligraphy. I haven't done any for quite a long time. And then the last thing I'll do is just see what this fine pumice gel is like. It says it blends well with other golden gels, mediums or colours. So playing with it like this, it doesn't noticeably feel much rougher, given the pumice name in it. I'm just going to actually feel it. Okay, so it's a very, very, very fine grit to it. I've got a leaflet here about the different golden products, and I'm wondering if this is in it so I can see what it's actually for. So it says that there are fine, coarse and extra coarse pumice gels. They mix well with golden acrylic colours. Fine pumice gel is useful as a drawing ground. So if it's more to be used as a drawing ground, that just means it's going to add some more texture or like a bit more tooth to your surface for gripping onto pencil lead. The one ground which I had from Golden before is this pastel ground. I'm just curious how different this is from the fine pumice gel, because the purpose of this is to add texture to cardboard and other surfaces so that pastel will grab onto it. Oops, some colour coming off my palette knife. Actually, I'll just rub it in the same as that one. So apart from my pink edition for my palette knife, it's the same kind of colour, just a very, very pale beige. They actually feel really, really similar. For the pastel ground, so it prepares a background and gives a similar tooth to papers designed for pastel and chalk. And it can be tinted with acrylic colour or increased tooth by adding golden, fine or coarse pumice gel. So if I want my pastel ground to grip even better, it's saying that I can add this pumice gel to it. So I've just pulled out a pastel. I'll show you the difference. So this is fairly smooth sketchbook paper. Whoa. So you can see where I've put the pastel ground, and the pastel is much more concentrated than just on the paper because of the tooth created by the pastel ground. And you can see the difference when it's blended out. The pastel ground is kind of clinging on to the pastel. I'll just try with the pumice gel as well. So it does a pretty similar thing. Yeah, I'm not 100% sure what the difference is between the pumice gel and the pastel ground. And then I just wanted to do a quick comparison. I just wanted to see what would happen when I do colour pencil over the top of heavy body paint that's got the fine pumice gel mixed with it, and then just the plain heavy body paint. So this is Luminance pencil, and it goes over the acrylic okay. But you can see that it's less translucent. This is kind of what I imagined might happen. It can't fully stick to the slippery acrylic surface, but it can kind of pull off more, the paper can pull off more pigment, so you get a more concentrated layer of pencil. So that's with pretty even pressure. It's quite a bit more opaque with that one. Just to say, the reason I'd got this in the first place is because I got a friend in the village who's a really good pastel artist, and he never uses anything like pastel matte. He just uses mount board with this finely spread over it for all of his work, and it works out a lot cheaper to do it that way. So one day I need to have a good experiment and do a comparison between pastel matte and this, and do some actual pastel paintings on them. Just before the last thing I want to try out, I thought I'd just have a smudge of the slow drying acrylic compared to the water mixable oil. So the slow drying acrylic, the thinner areas have actually dried, and it's just these thicker raised areas which are now smudgeable. Whereas with the water mixable oil, the thinner areas are still smudgeable. So it looks like the slow drying acrylic just gives you a bit longer to work with, but not as long as oil paint. So the last thing I wanted to look at was this SoFlat Golden Matte Acrylic. So it seems to be a similar consistency to the fluid acrylics. Well, it's beautifully creamy. So the two paints I'd like to compare are the Lefranc Bourgeois Emulsion Vinyl, and this is basically a matte acrylic as well, and then this Holbein Acrylic Gouache. So it's called gouache, but it's actually, well, it's called an acrylic polymer emulsion, but this dries matte as well. So not a dissimilar consistency. And the flash is a little bit thicker. So the acrylic gouache and the SoFlat, the laydown felt almost identical there. Both really smooth and just really lovely and creamy. So I've got a slightly different colour here with this flash paint. So after the initial increased thickness at laydown, it did brush out in quite a similar way and is really smooth as well. I don't have an opacity rating for the SoFlat or the acrylic gouache, though with it being gouache you would expect it to be opaque anyway. And the Lefranc Bourgeois paint is a semi-opaque one, and it does seem to be a little bit more transparent than these other two. I've just dried these off with a heat tool so we can take a look at how matte they've dried. And yeah, they're all beautifully smooth and matte. I really love acrylic gouache and flash emulsion, so it's nice to know that the SoFlat matte acrylic is pretty similar in my super limited test at least. So that was mainly a play session for my benefit, just to get used to some of the new products that I've got. But hopefully one or two of you found it interesting to see some of the different paints and mediums from Golden. Thanks ever so much for watching. Bye! After I finished filming, it occurred to me to try out these new Caran d'Ache Neo Arts over the top of the matte acrylics. So the peachy colour and the darker blue were Neo Arts, and they lay down nicely, but this shows you the difference between the acrylic gouache and the flash and SoFlat. The Neo Arts had better opacity, well, they grip better to the SoFlat and the flash vinyl emulsion, and they just don't grip as well to the acrylic gouache. I'll show you up close, you might be able to see the difference. It just doesn't come out as strongly on the acrylic gouache. And then the light blue was Neo Pastel 1. I'd experienced this before. This is partly why I like flash paints, because mixed media go over the top of it so well, whereas they just don't stick as well to the acrylic gouache. But it seems like the SoFlat has got similar properties to the flash. And this is the Neo Art. You can see the Neo Art is just operates identically to the Neo Colour one. And if you want to know more about these Neo Arts, I've done a couple of videos on them recently. So yeah, I really am going this time. Bye!